Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of My Name is Dad. It's been a while since I've done one of these Who I Am series, but I have a little time right now, and I kind of have my thoughts put together, so I decided that I'm going to do another episode. I think we're on number 13, but before we get started, let's talk about the sponsor, which is myself, Point P Grading and Turfgrass Maintenance, LLC. I provide laser grading services and landscape contractor services. Like recently, I'm overseeding a high school baseball field and softball field. Where basically you put the winter grass over the summer grass that's going dormant for the winter, and then your grass will stay nice and green all year long. So check out the website, pointbgrading at pointbgrading.com, and then email pointbgrading@gmail.com. All right, we are on, I believe, episode 13 of the Who I Am series, and we're kind of getting back in the swing of things again. I think where we left off was I had graduated from Texas Tech, and which I kind of wanted to talk about just a little bit. During my time at Texas Tech, I just wanted to reinforce and point out again that, if you ever heard, like you ever heard of relationships have an 80-20 split or a 85-15 split? Well, that is very true with my marriage with Miss White, that I definitely did 80-85% of the work, and Miss White did 15 to 20% if she did that. Like when I went to Texas Tech, I'm a full-time student, also working a full-time job, also making time to pick up the kids from school, take the kids to the doctor and the dentist, also finding time to coach kids in their sports and do all those things, paying all the bills. I was in charge of all the finances. So basically, I was cooking all the dinners. Miss White, she basically put all of her effort, 100% of her effort into her job, her career, and, her. And then when she would come home, I just get shit left over, She put all of her effort and energy into her job, and her job, her public image, her reputation are the highest priorities in her life. Nothing comes before that. She will put that stuff, again, this is my opinion, but she will put that stuff definitely over me during that time. She would even choose that stuff over her own kids, over everything. Nothing comes before her reputation, her public image, and her job. Those were her highest priorities. So again, I am super busy. I'm stressed out. School, finances, work, kids, cooking dinners, doing all these things during Texas Tech. And Miss White's just kind of along for the ride. Now, even when we bought our house, Miss White didn't do anything. All she had to do was show up and sign the papers. And she only had to sign papers because she was married to me. I did all the work of getting approved, pre-approved. When you're first time home buyer, they make you take a class. I had to take the class. I had to answer emails every day. They need this form or this tax return or this paycheck stub or this and this. Every day there was an email from the mortgage guy, and I did all that. I took care of every single piece of paperwork that had to be done to buy our first house. And again, Miss White, she showed up the day to sign papers, and even the day of or the day before we signed papers, there was like one paper that got left out, and I was at work, and they had to send this paper over to me with a courier, and then had to meet the courier and had to sign it, then they had to take it back. Again, I don't think Miss White quite understood the amount of work it takes to buy your first house. If you bought a house, you kind of know that it's not easy, especially when you don't have the highest credit score and you're skating thin ice just trying to get approved and all that stuff. So, again, that was kind of like during coming out of my Texas Tech years, but we're kind of going to go into, kind of after that and kind of what happens. And really after I graduated, it was a huge, big weight off my shoulders. The stress definitely went away for a little bit. One of the things was that when I graduated, at my job, I was working for the city of Peoria. One of the things I always kind of told myself is that once I graduated, that I would kind of look for something else to get, to move on. Now I have this bachelor's degree. I'm going to use that to get a better job, to get a different, a promotion, whatever that was. And that's what happened. I got promoted at the city of Peoria. I think largely because of my degree at Texas Tech. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot of stuff about what it takes to be like management, and you just think a little different. You see things a little differently after college and stuff like that. And that's one of the great things that I took from my time going to college, even if it being online, that I do see the world a little bit different than I did before. So yeah, I got promoted. So I decided to stick around with the city of Peoria for a little longer. But as we go into, this is the fall of 2019. Well, spring of 2020, I think we all kind of remember what happened. It is COVID time. And I kind of remember hearing some stories about COVID, started like in China, obviously. But then, China was doing a pretty good job of covering it up. But I do remember hearing, I think there was like Italy got hit pretty bad. And then then it started spreading over Europe and everything. And then you hear, oh, the first case in America is here. And then you start hearing people getting sick and sick and sick. And then I remember it was almost like spring break time, which would have been March of 2010. I remember if I was at work, I was at home, and then you start hearing that the NBA, started canceling games. They're like, oh, tonight's games are canceled because one of the players, had COVID and all this stuff. And then it was kind of like, oh man, this is weird. This is getting kind of serious here. And it was. So basically when everything kind of shut down, our kids were on spring break, and we had, our kids went to my parents' house in Texas for spring break. So when they came back, basically schools were canceled. Everything was canceled. It was pretty much stay indoors. I remember me and Miss White, we went down to the grocery store, and just to get normal stuff, even just like toilet paper was a huge thing back then. We went to the store, we went down, like as soon as they opened, there was a long ass line, and, they had store members just giving you one pack of toilet paper and said, there you go. That's all you get. Come back when that runs out. Because, people were hoarding that stuff. And I just remember thinking, like, this is unbelievable. Like, we're in America here, and they're rationing out stuff, like the biggest capitalist country in the world, and we're rationing toilet paper, I was like, I couldn't believe it. But I do remember that I did not get COVID for a while. My kids got COVID. I think they got like the second strain. I don't remember what it was called. But I didn't get to like the fourth strain or something like that. And I did get sick. I got sick pretty good, but I was back, like 4 or 5 days I was back. I did have just like a little, I remember thinking I did have a little bit of like long COVID where you kind of have that fogginess for another week or two. And I did have that, but not that it really, I couldn't go to work or anything like that. You just felt a little off still for another week or two. I do know people who had long COVID, and I believe that. I believe that's true, because I know that I kind of felt it a little bit afterwards too. So we're shut down, but in Arizona they had, only essential employees were able to go to work, and I was deemed an essential employee. I don't know why, but I was. But basically, I worked in parks and recreation, and I worked at the community park in Peoria, and the Arizona had deemed that the park should remain open so people could go outside and walk around and still have plenty of space from each other. So that's what we did. And again, the grass still needs to be mowed. That ain't going to stop growing just because of COVID and stuff, and just to maintain those kind of things, but basically we laid off or furloughed our part-time employees. It was just me and 2 other full-time employees, and we basically just kind of maintained the park there for a while, just mowing and changing out trash bags every once in a while. I mean, no one was ever out there. There's a pond there so you can go fishing, but they weren't stocking the lake anymore. But people still go out there and go fishing. And then I had a bunch of meetings that were all virtual and all that stuff, and all the people on my virtual meetings were all at home, and I was there in the office. But yeah, I worked the entire time during COVID because I was deemed an essential employee. But, the schools were canceled, so the kids and Miss White were at home. They ended up doing the homeschooling, I believe, the next school year. But that first school year, they just basically canceled the second half of 2020. And then at one point, I got a call from the boss of my department, and he asked me if I would be willing to transfer to the spring training complex. And he kind of explained what was going on, and I was like, yeah, I'll go over. Especially if you guys need help, I'll do it. So I did. I transferred over to the spring training complex in Peoria. And I think at this point, or when I first got there, everything was still kind of shut down. So we were just kind of like maintaining, and some of the teams, the MLB baseball was like trying to figure out how they were going to come back and finish the season, and they eventually did and everything. But I remember that the city of Peoria got vaccines, and they got the first vaccines that they got were the Johnson & Johnson one shot. So that was the first vaccine that I got, was the Johnson & Johnson one. But during COVID, especially when COVID was shut down, and I didn't have school anymore, and work was slow. I just went to work, and I would, there'd be nobody on the freeway when I was driving to work. I remember it would be like me and 3 other people. We'd all be doing like 100 miles per hour to work because there was no one on the freeway. And I get to work like 6:30 in the morning or whatever, 6 o'clock. I mean, there was nobody out there. And I go to work and I do some mowing and do my virtual meetings and, kind of change some trash bags and refill the toilet paper in the restrooms and stuff. And I don't know, just kind of hung out for a while. But I had to go to work. And then what kind of happened is, I talked to Miss White, and I told her, I said, look, I kind of want to, reprioritize our marriage. And I told her, I am going to prioritize you in my life, because with the kids and our careers and school, it's easy to fall into this sort of trap of, yes, my spouse is there, but they're not really a priority, especially when you have young kids. It's hard to you got to get a babysitter to go out on date night. And we didn't have a lot of date nights. And I said, the kids are getting a little older. They're kind of able to kind of take care of themselves now. If we wanted to go out, I don't think it's a big deal if the kids stayed home or whatever. So I told her, I said, I think this is a good opportunity for, especially now that I'm done with school and I decided to stay in Peoria for a while, that I want to reprioritize, make her my number one priority, and really work on that and really show that she really is my number one priority in my life. And she agreed, and she was down for that. And it was, we had a great COVID. You heard a lot of the stories how people were like, they couldn't stand staying with, being in the same room or the same house all the time with their spouse. It was quite the opposite for us. We really had a good COVID. We talked more than ever. We hung out more than ever. We did the MB Squared YouTube videos with our kids, and we bought all the board games, and, and we would go hiking because you could go out to the parks and go hiking if you wanted. You just kind of tried to stay away from people. But, we did a lot of that, and it was great. It was like, wow, this is awesome that this is working, that I went to my wife and was like, hey, let's reprioritize our marriage here, and it worked, and it was really, really good. So then I'm now at the Peoria Sports Complex, and this definitely is, they were having some problems, and they were trying to figure out how to come back, and you have to kind of work with Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball has all these strict rules about COVID, and you have to wear a mask all the time and all these things, and we were just trying to figure out, one, to get staff back and to get the place staffed up again, to ready for another spring training, and just trying to navigate all the rules and, how are we going to do this? So basically, I had to like get tested every day, had to go like spit in the little tube, and then they would test it every day to see if you had COVID. And I had to be up on my vaccines because that was just, Major League Baseball rules, where it was like, we can't technically tell you have to do this, but if you want to do the job that you're doing, you're gonna have to follow these rules, So it's like you kind of have to. So, and I don't believe that we ever got our kids vaccinated. Just me and Miss White did, and really, I did just so I could keep going to work. That was really the only reason why. But we didn't get our kids vaccinated. We figured once the kids got COVID twice, I got COVID once. Miss White might have got it twice, but we figured that was probably good enough. Just their regular natural immunity was probably good enough for the kids. Coming out of COVID, so I now have this work stuff going. And not that it's taking up more time than it did before when I was at Texas Tech, but it's definitely there were challenges, and it did take up some time in my life. But again, I still had plenty of time to do the things that I wanted to do and prioritize my wife and my kids and all that stuff. And again, I was making probably more money than I ever had before. Not that I was making a ton of money, but I was making more money than I had before, so that was good. But coming out of COVID, that's when Miss White had to go back to work. And basically once she went back to work, her ways went back to the way they were, that her work, then became her number one priority again. And I realized coming out of COVID that, that I was able to be a priority in her life, or a high priority in her life, because she didn't have work. When she didn't have work, then she was able to make time for me. Then she was able to prioritize me in her life and for us to have a real good relationship. But when work gets involved, that again becomes her number one priority, and I get kicked down to the bottom of the totem pole again. And coming out of COVID, I realized that I hadn't thought of it that way before. And it would happen like during the summer. It would be like, oh great, and then she'd go back to work and be like, oh, got to deal with this shit all over again. And that's what happened coming out of COVID. And I realized, oh yeah. But not that I wasn't that way before too, because I was busy. We had little kids and I was going to school and had this and had that. But to me, it was just like, oh, this is a pattern that she'll never break. That this is just something I have to accept, or now that I realize, oh, this is the pattern, and that's what it is. So as we kind of come up on the 20-minute mark here, that's kind of like our COVID story. And again, we had a great COVID, but as soon as COVID, left us, or mostly left us, and we were all able, and she was able to go back to work, it just, things kind of went back to the way they were of, not the greatest. But our kids did sort of handle COVID somewhat well. I remember the first time when my older son Brody went back to play sports. He was basically he could barely run because he just hung out inside all the time, and played video games. So the first time he went out to do physical activity, he could barely jump and run. He was so out of shape and stuff like that. I remember that was kind of funny. And we played. He played his first tackle football season coming out of COVID, and there were all these rules, and if you were in contact with somebody who had COVID, you had to sit out for 2 weeks. So it felt like every year, or the first couple years of football and sports, our son had to miss 2 weeks of the season because, not that he got COVID, but that he was in contact with somebody who got COVID. So, in COVID, I did know nobody. I don't think anybody really close to me I knew died of COVID, but I did know friends of friends, or a friend, an acquaintance or whatever, that some people did die from COVID. So not that, I'm not trying to make light of COVID or anything, but it to me, COVID was a very, very real thing. I remember I was worried. I was worried. I'm not in the best shape, and they were like, what they're describing on TV. I'm like, oh shit, that's me. Like I'm a overweight, getting close to middle-aged man. And like, oh shit, that this could happen to me. And I remember that I did have some anxiety again, and this is one of the times where I personally individually went to therapy myself because I was having a lot of social anxiety, just being out, like going to the grocery store and stuff, and just, kind of being worried. And I worked with a therapist, and that really helped me too. And of course, I had to do it all virtual and everything. But we are at the 20-minute mark, so we'll kind of cut this one off here. When we come back, we're going to be talking about me leaving the city of Peoria, and then also starting a new business. And then we're going to start to get into the real emotional drama stuff also. All right. Thanks for listening, and check out the flip side.